Malik Jordan didn't usually notice the quiet sounds of the dorm hallway anymore. The hum of fluorescent lights, the distant slam of a stairwell door, someone's music leaking faintly through cheap drywall. But that night, they all seemed louder. It was close to midnight, and he was exhausted in the way that came from juggling too many responsibilities at once. He had just returned from the campus media lab after spending hours finishing an edit he needed to submit before morning. His backpack was heavy with equipment, his eyes dry from staring at screens, and the only thing on his mind was getting inside his room, setting his alarm, and sleeping for exactly 5 hours before class. He swiped his student ID at the residence hall entrance, heard the familiar mechanical click, and stepped inside. The building smelled like laundry detergent and overcooked ramen. The security camera above the door blinked its small red light, something he barely registered, and he walked across the lobby toward the elevator. A couple of students sat on couches laughing quietly over something on a laptop. Malik nodded at them, received distracted smiles in return, and rode up to his floor. His roommate was already asleep when he entered. Malik moved carefully, respecting the darkness and the silence, placing his bag down and changing quietly. Within minutes, he was under the covers, brain shutting off piece by piece. Nothing dramatic, nothing unusual, just another night in a semester filled with them. The next afternoon, however, the email arrived. It came through while he was sitting in a lecture hall, halfway through notes on media ethics. His phone buzzed once. He glanced down absent-mindedly, expecting a group chat notification. Instead, he saw the subject line, "Residence Conduct Notice. Mandatory meeting required." Malik frowned. That was unusual. He opened it. The message stated that he had been documented for a violation of dormitory policy the previous night and was required to meet with the resident advisor that evening. No details, no explanation, just formal language and a time slot. For a moment, he thought it must be a mistake. Malik wasn't loud, didn't throw parties, didn't host crowds. His version of rule-breaking was microwaving popcorn past quiet hours. Still, he attended. That evening he walked into the RA office, a small converted study room with motivational posters and a desk that tried too hard to look authoritative. Behind it sat a white RA named Connor, junior year, polo shirt tucked in, expression already set somewhere between patient and disapproving. "Hey, Malik," Connor said, motioning to the chair. "Have a seat." Malik sat, calm but curious. "What's going on?" Connor picked up a clipboard. "You were reported for being present in a restricted floor area last night after access hours and failing to comply with building policies." Malik blinked. "That doesn't make sense." Connor continued as though reading from a script. "Specifically, there's a report of you entering the north stairwell corridor around 11:52 p.m., an area under temporary access restriction due to maintenance." Malik stared at him. "I didn't go anywhere near the stairwell. I came in, went upstairs, and went to bed." Connor nodded slowly, the kind of nod that suggested polite disbelief. "The report identifies you by description." Malik felt a small knot form in his chest. "Description?" Connor glanced at the paper. "Male student, black hoodie, backpack, late entry." Malik let out a breath, steady. "That describes half the campus." Connor didn't smile. "I'm just relaying the report." Malik leaned forward slightly. "So you're writing me up based on someone saying they saw someone who looked like me?" Connor shifted. "There's documentation and presence confirmation." Malik's brow furrowed. "What confirmation?" Connor tapped the clipboard. "Your building access swipe shows you entering the hall around that time." Malik nodded. "Yes, entering the building, not going into a restricted corridor." Connor's tone sharpened slightly. "Malik, we don't issue conduct notices lightly." And there it was, the subtle shift. Not investigation. Assumption. Malik recognized the pattern, the quiet expectation that he would accept the narrative simply because it had institutional backing. He stayed calm. Then, let's verify it properly. Connor frowned. What do you mean? Malik replied evenly, door swipe logs. Every secured door records timestamp access. Pull the hallway reader logs. If I entered that corridor, there will be a record. Connor hesitated, clearly not expecting procedural pushback. That's not usually necessary. Malik met his eyes. It is when you're documenting something I didn't do. Silence stretched between them. Connor glanced down at his clipboard, then back up. I'll check with housing admin, he said. Malik nodded once. Please do. 2 days passed. Malik went about his classes, but the situation stayed with him. Not because he feared punishment, he knew he hadn't violated anything, but because of what it represented. A mark on his record. A narrative created without verification. The ease with which suspicion became paperwork. On the 3rd day, he received another email requesting a follow-up meeting. Connor's demeanor was different this time. Less confident, more procedural. He motioned Malik in and closed the door. So, Connor began, clearing his throat, we pulled the swipe logs. Malik waited. Connor looked down at printed pages on his desk. Your card registered entry at the main entrance at 11:48 p.m. Malik nodded. Connor continued, there is no record of your ID accessing the stairwell or restricted floor doors. Silence. Connor added, quieter now. Additionally, camera review showed you went directly to the elevator. Malik leaned back slightly. So the report was incorrect. Connor shifted in his chair. Yes, the conduct write-up will be voided. Malik held his gaze. Void it formally. Connor blinked. What? I want written confirmation the report is removed. Connor hesitated, then nodded. You'll get an email. Malik stood, slinging his backpack over his shoulder. He wasn't angry, not outwardly, but he wasn't going to let the moment dissolve into institutional forgetfulness either. At the door, he paused. Next time, Malik said calmly, verify before documenting. Connor didn't answer. Later that evening, Malik received the confirmation email. Record cleared. No violation logged. He sat on his bed reading it once more, then archived it carefully. Not because he expected more trouble, but because experience had taught him something important. Systems corrected quietly, but accusations echoed loudly. Outside his window, campus life continued. Laughter drifting across the quad, distant music, footsteps in the hall. Ordinary sounds that now carried a little more weight. Malik set his phone down, leaned back against the wall, and let himself breathe. He hadn't done anything dramatic. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't made a scene. He had simply insisted on facts. And sometimes, that insistence was the difference between carrying a label and walking away without one. Malik didn't think much about the email confirmation the first hour after he received it. He archived it, closed his laptop, and tried to return to the routine he'd been building all semester. Class, editing, part-time shifts, repeat. But something about the experience stayed with him. Not loud or dramatic, just persistent. It was the realization that if he hadn't pushed back, calmly, specifically, with procedural language, the accusation would have stayed in his record. It would have existed quietly in a database somewhere, shaping how the next authority figure read his name. That awareness followed him through the next few days. By Friday afternoon, the campus was buzzing with pre-weekend energy. Groups gathered outside residence halls, music drifted from open windows, and the weather had shifted just enough toward warmth that everyone seemed determined to be outside. Malik returned to his dorm after class, balancing his laptop and camera bag, and noticed Connor speaking with another RA near the lobby desk. Connor glanced up when Malik walked in, not avoiding eye contact, but not fully comfortable either. Malik nodded once and kept moving. He wasn't interested in confrontation. Closure had already been documented, but halfway to the elevator, he heard Connor call his name. "Hey, Malik, got a minute?" Malik paused, turning slowly. "Sure." Connor stepped away from the desk, hands in his pockets, posture less authoritative than usual. "I wanted to follow up, off record." Malik studied him for a second, then nodded. "Okay." They moved to a quieter corner of the lobby. Connor cleared his throat. "I just wanted to say, that situation probably shouldn't have gone the way it did." Malik waited. Connor continued. "The report came from another resident assistant doing rounds. They logged it quickly, based on observation and swipe entry timing. It happens fast during shifts." Malik's expression stayed calm. "Fast isn't the same as accurate." Connor shifted slightly. "Yeah, I get that now." Malik adjusted his grip on his bag strap. "Here's the thing. Being documented isn't neutral. Even temporarily. There's weight to that." Connor nodded slowly. "I know." Malik didn't raise his voice or change tone. He simply spoke plainly. "You said earlier that conduct notices aren't issued lightly, but this one was. And if I hadn't asked about the logs, would anyone have checked?" Connor didn't answer immediately. His silence was answer enough. Eventually he said, "Probably not right away." Malik exhaled softly, not in frustration, but in confirmation of something he'd already suspected. "That's the issue." Connor rubbed the back of his neck. "We're talking about reviewing documentation procedures at the next staff meeting, making log checks mandatory before notices go out." Malik gave a small nod. "Good." There was no satisfaction in his face, just practicality. Connor added, "For what it's worth, I didn't think you were doing anything wrong." Malik looked at him. "But you still handed me the accusation." Connor held the gaze, then lowered his eyes briefly. "Yeah." Malik didn't press further. There was nothing to win there. Instead, he said, "Systems don't run on intentions. They run on actions." Connor nodded again. The conversation ended without tension, but also without pretense of friendship. Malik stepped into the elevator and rode up to his floor, the familiar mechanical hum filling the space. When the doors opened, the hallway looked exactly as it always had. Scuffed tile, identical doors, posters curling at the corners. Yet he saw it differently now. He noticed the card readers mounted beside doors, the camera domes in ceiling corners, the infrastructure quietly tracking movement. Inside his room, his roommate Jay was gaming with headphones on. Malik dropped his bag and sat at his desk, opening his laptop. He pulled up the archived email again, reading it one more time, not because he doubted it existed, but because repetition reinforced certainty. Then he started writing. Not a complaint, not yet, but a reflection document. He detailed the timeline, interaction tone, procedural gaps, and resolution path. He saved it privately. Malik believed in preparation more than reaction. If something like this happened again, he would already have the language ready. Later that evening, he headed down to the study lounge. A group of students were discussing a philosophy assignment about institutional trust, one of those broad campus debates that usually stayed theoretical. Malik listened quietly before one of them asked his opinion. He considered for a moment before responding. "Trust isn't built on policies existing," he said. "It's built on policies being applied correctly before harm happens." The group fell silent, thoughtful. Someone nodded slowly. Malik didn't elaborate further. He didn't tell them about the notice, or the logs, or the meeting. He didn't need to. The lesson had already shaped his understanding in a way conversation couldn't fully capture. Walking back to his room later, he swiped his ID at the hallway door and watched the green light flash. He paused for a second, not out of paranoia, but awareness, recognizing how a simple timestamp could tell a story about him that others might interpret differently depending on context. He stepped inside anyway, because he wasn't going to live cautiously in spaces he had every right to occupy. That night, as he prepared for bed, he glanced at the archived folder one more time before shutting down his laptop. Not out of fear, out of readiness. Malik knew something many people didn't learn until later in life. Fairness often required participation, calm insistence, evidence, follow-through. He lay down, listening again to the distant hallway sounds, the same noises that had faded into background weeks before. Now they felt familiar again, ordinary, neutral, and sleep came easier. The accusation was gone from the system, but the awareness it created stayed with him, sharpening his confidence, clarifying his boundaries, and reminding him that sometimes the difference between being labeled and being heard came down to one simple act: asking for proof before accepting judgment.